dip. I'll have 2 number 9s, a number 9 large, a number 6 with extra dip.
Oh man, that was such a fun intro to make, so if you enjoyed it or just enjoy my content in general, then hitting the like button will really help out. Thank you. We're back here in Santa Isabel, our fictional city located on the Central Pacific Californian coastline. Now, the majority of Santa Isabel is developed through good old zoning, the way God intended the game to be played, and I'm generally pretty happy with the look we've achieved with those restrictions. And while you guys seem to enjoy that approach as well, there are some pretty major compromises, and as soon as we stray off from the holy path and do a bit of manual plopping, like the suburban quarter out here, it becomes so much easier to add that unique flavor that makes a city feel like a city. And that mixture of zoning and detailing is a playstyle I really like, because I think we're able to capture the actual scale of cities while making sure we have some cool focal points. So today we're going to develop or redevelop some key areas here in Santa Isabel, starting with parts of downtown and moving on to the port. And we're gonna have to make sure all of what we do is actually functional, because we've got a city to manage as well as a slightly shaky economy. Okay, so just to warn you all in advance, the first change here is going to be fairly dramatic, and it's going to result in the automatic demolition of quite a few zoned level 5 buildings, because we're going to widen Broadway, the main arterial cutting through Santa Isabel's downtown core, inner city, and eventually leading all the way up to the hills there in the background. And Broadway is completely symmetrically aligned with the central train station, so obviously that is a design setup that I want to maintain. But this also presents a bit of a problem, because ideally I would just upgrade this type of road, this medium road, to the first tier of large roads, which is the 6-lane road. However, since I want to upgrade from the center on out, so I want to center it, so I'm going to click snap to existing geometry. I'm going to pause the game. Then you'll see that as soon as I click, it leaves half a zoning tile between each side of the road and the zonable space. So if I upgrade the central part to a 6-lane road, I might as well upgrade it to an 8-lane divided road, because there's space for it. And if I just leave it at this, then zoning is going to be all messed up, of course. So yeah, this is all about trusting the process. Wow, that is, it's like the 1960s all over. Instead, it's not a Robert Moses freeway, it's just an avenue. Imagine if this was a spontaneous decision I'd made 10 minutes before recording. Would make you kind of nervous, huh? Ah, you're all in good hands. No worries, no worries. And the new width of this road is providing us with a ton of new possibilities in terms of customizing it with Road Builder. And additionally, all the new free real estate, all this available land that just magically appeared, is now ripe for redevelopment, maybe even a bit of plopping, because I think something that would really make this view standout would be to have the tallest structures of the city kind of follow this wide stretch of Broadway. A real life example of this that I've always found super cool is from the Paseo de la Reforma in Mexico City. I'm sure I butchered that, I'm sorry. But as we align the camera here, you'll see this main avenue cutting through in a straight line. It's got an added coolness factor by having like a monument and a massive roundabout in the center here. So it's definitely outshining San Isabel. But the overall look of this type of urban development is just so cool. And in terms of the aforementioned road builder possibilities we now have, we might take a bit of inspiration from the La Reforma as well, because it has these side roads with a bit of surface parking. So these are the ones you'd utilize if you actually need to access any of the major structures alongside the avenue. But if you're just trying to move through it, which plenty of people probably do because it's a main arterial, you can just stay on like on the main straights here. Here's an image of it where it's a little more clear, although it's also very clear just how wide and massive this road is. So it's gonna be a condensed version in our case. And it might even be fun and appropriate to name the tallest structure in San Isabel the maybe Torre de la Reforma, which is basically what this tower is named in Mexico City, just to kind of signify the Hispanic influences. And before you point to Wilshire Boulevard in Los Angeles as a much nearer example, you're of course completely right, but we actually already have a Wilshire Boulevard at home. It's Pacific Boulevard. Alright, enough of all that, let's get to the plopping. We're going to adhere to two rules pretty loosely. So the first one is going to be we're going to have snapping enabled so that technically we could actually have grown these buildings organically. We just choose not to compensate for all the lost development, because we just have less zoning space now that Broadway has been widened. Now the second rule is that we're going to attempt somewhat to adhere to our demand. Fortunately, we have demand for everything, but we obviously have more demand for high-density residential than we do office buildings. So we might place 1 or 2 office towers and then maybe 3, 4, or even 5 high-density residential towers. Starting with this corner on Broadway and Central Street West, it is flanked by a mid-rise and something that's a little higher density, so I think it's just begging for a residential tower. Taking a look at the zoning here, we can go 3 tiles deep and about 5 tiles wide. This leaves us with 2 level 5 options, this EU level 5 tower and this NA one. And I'm gonna go with the NA one for the sole reason that it looks like an office tower. It's a residential tower that's cosplaying a little bit. And since our demand is probably going to necessitate more residential towers than office towers, as we just discussed, which is a little uncommon probably in most cases in most downtowns like this, we're gonna take it whenever we get a chance of adding a residential building that actually looks like an office building. Let's just have a good look and let this tower sink in. So it's obviously the new tallest building in the city, and it does stand out quite a bit, but that also makes the skyline look a little unique. So this might be the Torre de la Reforma, of course, depending on what else we figure out. Moving on to the corner between Broadway and the appropriately named Spanish Road, this time around we've got a lot of space. We could go for a 5x6 even, or a 6x5, but let's see what we've got. Well, I guess I got slightly cold feet, so I found this small level 5 3x4, and I'm gonna align it so that there's a bit of space for a few pocket parks surrounding it. So it's not gonna be brought all the way to Broadway. I'm just gonna be a bit of distance. We're gonna get rid of some fencing here because that's seems a little hostile. And then we'll add in a few pocket parks. And getting a decent look, I'd say that works out fairly well. Okay, so the previous rules aside, I do feel San Isabel deserves at least one unique custom skyscraper. And I think this block between Spanish Road, Broadway and Hamilton Street is the perfect fit. So I've got a bit of an idea. It's gonna look wacky until it doesn't. Actually, the final result might look wacky as well. But what we're gonna do is we're going to grab this level 5 3x5 residential building. I'm gonna place one of these, and then I'm going to find the prop version of the same building. which I've got right here. And I'm gonna place 2 of these. Yeah, it's a mess now, but it's gonna look cool, I'm certain. So what I'm gonna do is I'm going to angle this at about 45 degrees to the 90-degree corner, because that's going to add a really nice kind of breakup of the current grid layout here. And then what we're going to do is we're going to grab one of the prop versions here, which we can freely move and lower into the ground without issue. And we're going to align that to... Actually, let's just get that out of the way, because the first thing we're actually going to do is we're going to grab one of the prop versions. We're going to flip that to 180 degrees from this building. And then we'll just move it slightly into it, but so that it's still aligned to the corner right here. Then we're gonna lower this girl down by quite a bit. And we'll get the final heights in place in just a moment. Before we do that though, we're going to splice this version into it and align that to the corner as well. Lots of move it magic later. That is a pretty uniquely looking skyscraper. And I do like the overall design. We're gonna streamline things a little bit by just making sure that the color scheme is, yeah, I mean, a little more developer neutral, developer boring, you could say. And just make sure that it kind of moves through all 3 segments of this building. But otherwise, that is a really unique look, and I think it works. Now, we are going to try and adhere to the functional rule. So since we've got one functional building here with 180 households, but 2 props, we can't really afford just having, you know, 2 props take out more than half of this block. So we're gonna have to earn some tax revenue on this lot. It's centrally located, and we would be able to grow something super fancy here. So what we're gonna look for is some of the star queue zoning blocks and utilize those. So I guess the middle building is what you could consider like a high density block. So I'm gonna grab one of these 1x4 and get that placed. And that is going to add how many households? 37. That's not a lot compared to the actual building. Probably going to add at least 1 more of these. And then I'm going to add 1 more for the small tower, I guess. So let's just see. We'll just try to actually align it with like the front entrance. I don't know how much that actually matters in terms of how people enter and exit the premises, but I guess it's worth a shot. I think this residential tower is sort of cosplaying as an office tower, just not as convincing, but it's good enough for us. Now, there's just one issue with this building, and that is that the lower floors, the one facing the street, is very hostile. It wouldn't be super unrealistic to just place it and just accept that for a US city at least. Just look at some of the lower floors and the skyscrapers in the downtown Los Angeles area. But, I mean, we can make it a little more friendly to people. And one approach we could take is to pretty much just kind of squeeze it in between these buildings. Basically just splice it into this signature building so that part of the lower floor actually turns into a super hip bar. I think that's gonna be the last actual skyscraper we could place down in downtown. Looking at it from a distance and different angles, I think it's really coming together now. And to think that we started with this super anonymous building on 166 Alameda Avenue being the previous tallest building in downtown, we've come a long way. We've got 4 proper towers now eclipsing it, and we just need to redevelop some empty lots, and downtown is going to look very changed indeed. I'm gonna throw on some music and develop the remaining lots, a mixture of medium density apartment blocks, some high density commercial, some mixed use, and then when I get back to you all, we're going to apply Road Builder to Broadway and try to customize it. finally hitting play after having the game paused for such a big project, and it's going to be really interesting to do a full before and after comparison, not just visually, but also in terms of demographic and the employee count here in downtown. I can already sense that we've increased the amount of households quite a bit, even though we have less buildable space due to the widening of Broadway. But I guess anything else would surprise me. We now have proper residential towers here, which we didn't really have before. If we zoom in a bit on the buildings we've placed, you can catch some real glimpses of the past here in Santa Isabel, because they have actually managed to retain some of the classical architecture, even some of the turn of the century stuff. You can only imagine how the city would have actually looked without all these modern towers, and if any of the older buildings weren't actually torn down, as is the case in so many downtowns in the US, but at least there's a bit of it, like this block here by the Central Street West and Broadway retains some beautiful old architecture. I think we're ready to customize Broadway, and I kinda lucked out here because someone else has already added the additional lanes on either side that we saw in Mexico City. So if you move into Road Builder and you click Manage and Discover, the cool Discover feature will allow you to download roads that other people have created. And it just so happens that this downtown core road is pretty much exactly what we need. I'm gonna commit one little change and then we're going to create a custom version of it. But I've just downloaded this and I can click here to place it. Or I can of course just move into large roads where I'll be able to find it out here. So if we grab this one and start upgrading, now you can see the snapping is going to be wonky here, but that's because I have the snap to zoning cell length enabled. I only need snap to existing geometry, just as when we actually upgraded this road in the first place. So let's just commit to this upgrade and see how that looks, and then we can do some of the changes that I can already see we're gonna need. Additionally, I don't want the 8-laner here connecting up to the park, but it does look kind of weird right now, so we are going to grab the 6-lane divided road and we'll do this upgrade, and then we'll just make sure to downgrade the size of the roundabout a little bit because that's looking pretty crazy. So something like this. This feels like a really cool visual and functional upgrade even without any changes, but just a few things can make it suit our needs a little better. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna grab Road Builder, then we're going to click it, and we're actually going to say edit all instances so that we have our own version of it. I'm just gonna name it Downtown Core Custom. Yeah, very creative. Because then we have our own version in case we want to use the base version at other places. I'm going to remove the trees here because I'd like to just manually add the trees at the interval and the height that I actually want. And that's pretty much it. The actual upgrade so that we get some grass decoration, I can just do that through the upgrading toolset, which is really cool and something we are going to do. So we're just going to move in here and just add this throughout the entire stretch, and then as a little final touch we'll make the transition to this part of Broadway a little nicer by not just disallowing street side parking, but more importantly just getting these grass medians added here so that there's a bit of continuity here. Now, one consequence of increasing the lane complexity is that the already slightly wonky traffic AI is going to have an even more wonky time navigating all this stuff. And unless we grab like a traffic light enhancer mod of some sort, then that's just how it is, and it's something we're pretty used to by now. But I think something we might do just to alleviate it is removing one of these intersections. Not physically removing them, but just disallowing the actual crossing. And I think Hamilton Street would be a good contender. There's already so many crossings right across Broadway that I think we should be able to disable this one. So what we're essentially going to do is grab the lane connector tool of the traffic mod and then say, we're just gonna pause and then say remove all connections. And then disallow this crossing so that we can get rid of all the crosswalks as well as the traffic lights, and so that you can just drive along this stretch of Broadway completely unobstructed. It would be super cool if the medians automatically connected, but if we're imagining this is like a retrofit, like a new solution the city's trying out, I don't really mind. I think that's gonna be all right, especially if we can just grab a net lane of some sort so that we just indicate that you can't move straight through here a little more obviously. There's these highway drive lanes, and this number 4 here is actually just about the right width of this. So if I can just get it aligned as good as possible, like this, and then just kind of move that through, I should even, yeah, I can even snap to it and then make the same arrangement over here. So it's almost like it's at a trial stage where the city is just testing it to see how much it improves the throughput here in Broadway. We could remove the crossing on Empire Street as well, but there's like a couple of issues with this. So one is that it is directly connected to the I-780, which moves eastwards towards the mountains and of course all the suburban sprawl of St. Isabel. And then the next street, Holly Street, doesn't actually have a proper crossing. It just ends in like a couple of cul-de-sacs. So I think we're just gonna keep as it is for now, and then we'll see how it works out. Which reminds me, there's probably a couple of tweaking we can do here just to make this a little smoother. Oh, let's not forget, this is not the 1137 Broadway, it is the Torre de la Reforma. Looking from a distance with the train station as the end piece, it's almost as if we've turned Broadway into a focal point on its own. And with that in mind, I think it's worth investing just a little more time into customizing and detailing it. And the first thing I want to do is utilize Move Its Manipulation mode to just make these intersections a little wider. And one of the cool aspects of now having plopped all these buildings is that we're not going to run into any zoning trouble when we actually commit to these changes, which is really nice. Because if you're about to do what I'm doing, you will start to lose out on some corner zoning blocks because the road is the corner is basically taking up more space. So clicking on this segment, I'm gonna hold down Alt, and then I can drag these out. And as you guys can see, I can increase the distance from the actual intersection. I don't want to do too much here because it of course has the functional change of actually making these Broadway segments shorter. So less traffic can fit here, but it's not a major problem now because we're not super burdened by traffic. But if I start doing the same with these smaller roads, so this would be Spanish Road, we get this much better curve here on the intersection, which I think is a little more realistic and a lot more pleasing to the eye. And there's probably going to be a trucker or two out there as well. That's gonna be happy about these changes. And if I click up the zoning menu, it's not easy to see here what I meant, but you can actually kind of see here that the original zoning grid has now been broken because of course the road is now just bigger. And I can imagine there's going to be truck drivers and commuters thanking me for applying the change here as well, because the turns you have to take from Central Street West and East respectively onto Broadway in either the west or eastbound direction is it's pretty tight if you're making a right turn anyways. So just dragging this out a little bit, I'm trying to kind of align it to the center of the curvature here so that I can get a somewhat symmetrical alignment on either side of Broadway. It's not gonna be perfect, but it's definitely gonna be good enough. Now, these medians are not just going to remain boring grass patches. No, we're going to add some very colorful detailing that is going to make Broadway a hit with influencers and visiting Instagrammers. Because we're going to use the Vibrant Foliage Pack to add some beautiful flower beds through the entire stretch. And then we're going to finish it off with some palm trees. So moving into landscaping, this pack actually allows me to filter specifically for it, which is always super cool when that's implemented. So we'll just click here, and as you guys can see, we get plenty of cool options available to us. Something I'd like to utilize are the colored versions of the bigger bushes, and it doesn't seem like I can actually select exactly the ones I need. because they're on two different pages basically. Just such a weird implementation. So we're going to deselect this and see if we can catch them all on the same page. And we can. We've got these 5 versions right here. I'm not going to try to pronounce them. The only thing here to consider is beautiful colors, very nice. So I'm gonna select all of these, grab the advanced line tool, and then in terms of the distance, the spacing is probably gonna be 3 meters, something like that. And then we're going to have a random rotation, of course, and then we might have 0.1 meters of spacing variation, as well as 0.1 meters of offset variation, because this is man-made, so it's not gonna be perfect. So if I hold down Control and click up once, I can change this to 0.1. We'll see how this actually looks. So I'm just gonna try to align this and drag. And that is beautiful. So I'm just gonna move through and add this to all the boring grass patches. For this final stretch of Broadway, which obviously has a different configuration before we reach the massive roundabout, we might just go ahead and pick some of the smaller versions. So we're gonna enable the pack filter, grab these 3 versions and just get this covered. Uh-oh, I don't think we've had a downtown fire yet. So where is that pesky fire station? Fire engine dispatched from the Santa Isabel downtown fire station. Let's have a look. Oh, it's over here. Ah, we actually get to see as it leaves the building. That's pretty cool. Now, hopefully it can get there in time. Come on, people. Move out the way. Oh no. Come on, drive. I'm gonna make the crossing, fire or not. I think we're gonna make it though. I think we might just make it. Someone just walked in there. Sophie Mills. Oh, well, she's walking back. Come on. Ah. The Vibrant Foliage pack also contains some palm trees that has been slightly modified, so they're basically identical to the vanilla palm trees, except they have lighting built into the base, which I think might be a cool feature at night throughout Broadway. So I'm gonna grab the Florida palm tree. It's just, I kind of like it. Not sure how location perfect it is. And then for the spacing, let's just try this out. So we're gonna make sure we have random rotation as well. I don't mind a little spacing variation. And actually, let's just change these. This is a tree being planted, so it wouldn't grow in like different directions as we're seeing with the bushes here. Let's align it between the first 2 sets right here, because we need to have some clearance for the traffic lights, of course. Yeah, it's definitely not gonna be 6 meters. It's more likely gonna be, I don't know, 12? 15 maybe? Let's go for 15. Let's just add a few lit up palm trees throughout the Pacific Park area as well, so it's not just Californian oaks, just kind of get a bit of mixture in between the palm trees and the other types of trees here. I'm taking some inspiration from one of the central parks in Sacramento, where you've got this mixture of many different trees and plenty of palm trees as well. Alright, let's bring out the lights. I do this way too early as is, so let's get some night lighting in here. Lots of emergency vehicles, but it is a big city by now and you don't really notice them all that much when it's bright and sunny outside. But let's zoom in a bit and we can see some of the palm tree illumination at play here. I think that looks fairly nice. And especially alongside Broadway, wow. That is a pretty cool effect as we can kind of see the light illuminate parts of the flower beds as well. Very, very insta-worthy. And this game in general just looks so nice, at least under the right conditions. We've got the mountains there of inner California in the background. We've got the downtown core all illuminated. Plenty of people are still working, it seems. Looking really, really good. I'm very happy with the rework of downtown so far. So something that looks a little less nice in this evening time is the unfinished port. So let's have a look at that. Alright, so with the upcoming Bridges and Ports DLC, I'm not looking into making any major revamps of the layout of the port, because chances are we'll probably be changing a few things when that DLC finally arrives. What we need for now from Port of Santa Isabel is more workplaces. We're sitting at around 1700, which is decent given the amount of land we've developed so far, and remembering that the cargo harbor has just a ridiculously low number of employees, I feel. Nonetheless, we've got lots of free land to develop, and I think we need that. Because unemployment is sitting at 8%, which I feel is kind of high for what is essentially a small city still. And homelessness has been rising. We're approaching 300, and these are probably tied together. Although this is California, so these people could be working homeless and not afford a place to live. I know that's kind of morbid, but you know, realistically. Anyways, lots of space to develop down here, and we're going to utilize a mixture of vanilla industrial buildings that you can just like plop and forget. They're gonna open up shop given our current demand and provide new workplace opportunities. And then we're going to mix in plenty of custom warehouses. So these are going to be mainly props, but we're going to utilize the modular zoning blocks mod to make them all functional. And the warehouses might require us to revamp or clean up the road layout a little bit, because this is very much built with zoning or vanilla buildings in mind due to the small lot sizes. And we might commit to some key upgrades as well, because we've obviously had a nice free patch since we laid out the foundations of this port, so we can mix up the key sites here with slightly more industrial looks. So we're going to quickly run through the construction of a custom functional warehouse in case you didn't know. So the first thing we need is the static ploppable service buildings mod. So we're going to grab that and then find something that looks like a warehouse. In this case, I've located the tram depot. So this is a ploppable static non-functional version, and it's basically just a prop. The cool thing about many of these actual props is that you can kind of repurpose them into what you want, depending on your narrative. And in this case, while it's a tram depot, it might as well just be a distribution center with lots of like cargo entrances on either side of the building. So with this one in mind, let's just pause, clean up the road layout a little bit, and get one of these placed. We'll add in a few box trailer props just to kind of get a sense of the scale of this thing, so that we know how to align the roads and add the functional workplaces. And I'll make sure to do this on either side, although we can't just utilize the road that's moving through here. That should be close enough. I figure we can make it a little nicer just by getting some of these in place at first, and then adjusting as necessary. So now that we've got this in place, we can add in a small road, maybe just an alley moving through from this main road here. Actually, let's just make sure we're utilizing the industrial road here as well. And we don't need anything over here. So with the modular zoning blocks mod, we can open up or find it, which you obviously also need, and just search for *Q. Because this is the creator of these zoning blocks. We go into buildings, We can filter in industry, and we have the blocks available here. They come in 3 different sizes, and they do have like a little prop attached to them. So ideally, you just want to align them to the road, but in a way where they are actually covered by the prop you've created, or zonable building as well. But obviously, the 1x6 offers a ton of flexibility by having the prop being so deep aligned into the actual asset. And you want to place quite a few of these if you're like utilizing a large space like this. It differs a little bit, it seems, in terms of how many workplaces they actually contain. But this should add a fair amount, 100 and something, I imagine. A cool little thing about these is that they're actually upgradable. So you can add some functional parking spots, you can add a pedestrian gate, a parking garage like underground as well, and then there's a block mover where you can move the zoning block to the center of the plot instead of the end, which is a pretty cool thing with this little prop here. Nonetheless, I'm not gonna place any of the parking. I'm gonna make, I think, some dedicated parking as we move through this warehouse district, but this is basically the gist of it. If we hit play, we'll see that these will be occupied eventually by some company. At least I'm seeing some of my industrial demand drop. There we go. So we've got an electronics producer moving in on this small lot here and providing 12 jobs, which I think is a good start, especially considering how many of these we can actually place. And since we did have the job count before at 1750-ish, it looks like we've added at least 400 jobs to this plot here. Which does make sense because some of these actually have more than 30 employees. So let's make sure we get a few more of these added, prioritizing functionality before we jump into any sort of detailing. Alright, so this turned out a little more green and bushy than I initially imagined, but I think I like it, and I think in the context of the slightly wacky, unique story behind the Port of Santa Isabel origins, the compromise between having cliff sides that are not only hard to develop port facilities around, but also home to an endangered bird that just so happens to really only live here, and which might not be doing all that well because it's not like the port is super far away from the cliffs. Anyway, that's a minor point. I think the overall point I'm trying to make is that Santa Isabel has enacted radical policies before, and it's part of what makes the city unique. So to build a modern port on a man-made island, but then dictate that parts of the development sizes, or rather parts of the lots that are to be developed, has to be dedicated to grassy patches and medians that are pretty much just allowed to grow freely, at least if they're not adding to any like fire hazard. I just think that sounds like a lot of fun, and it did make this area more interesting than I think it otherwise would have been. Now, I paused the time-lapse here for a couple of reasons, one of them being functional, but the first one is basically just to inspect how it looks with this very light detailing, because it's just a bunch of surfaces, bushes and trees, and some decals, and I'm not in any way insinuating that it wouldn't be much faster and more effective to basically just zone this area out. I'm just trying to say that I think if we use these major props, then the fact that they are so different in scale to all the zonable stuff, that alone just makes a huge difference. So even if we weren't going to detail this any further, I still think it looks really unique, and it looks pretty good, especially from afar. Now, the functional reason for pausing the time-lapse here is that we're starting to see some pretty interesting consequences of Santa Isabel being such a sprawling city. Because even though the city only stands at 33,000 residents, and of course all the businesses needed to support such a working force, the recycling center, which I think should ordinarily be able to handle a city of that size, at least in terms of population, actually can't really keep up. The recycling center here is pretty expensive, and it has 15 garbage trucks in constant use, and despite that, the city is just so spread out that it's having trouble servicing the actual port. And of course, as a result, we see that the efficiency of the cargo harbor is at half, basically, because of piled up garbage. Now, the recycling center is pretty upgradable, but two of the upgrades, namely the waste collection point as well as the storage extension, go beyond the size of the original lot, and we just don't have the space. Fortunately, the most relevant upgrade in our case would be the extra truck depot, adding 10 additional garbage trucks. But I think the issue here is that while these might just provide the extra capacity needed to actually reach and service the big port, as soon as we start spreading out San Isabel even more, we're just going to end up in the very same problem. So I think the better solution is to invest what little money we have in an additional recycling center and then place it directly by the port. The addition of a new recycling center at the port will also open up the possibility of separating the districts of the city between the two service providers, which I think is going to be an advantage moving forward. I guess technically we don't actually have the space for this small recycling center, but that's never really been the hindrance in our case, has it? So with a little bit of terraforming magic, we'll have the space in just a second. Would you look at that? Perfect snapping on this little extra pier. I added one additional over here because I think we'll just have like an empty pier here that might look fun, but yeah, it's all gonna require just a little additional terraforming. A tiny bit of detailing later, and I am in a rush to make sure this recycling center starts by just serving the port of Santa Isabel, because it looks eerily like all the garbage trucks have already spawned and are moving further away to serve other parts of the city. Damn. I hope I made it in time, but I guess I could just kind of speed up the simulation, and hopefully they should clean up the port as their next priority. Yeah, they pretty much all went to the main city. Oh man, I'm an idiot. Well, time will hopefully fix this issue, and I guess in the meantime I can say that I did do a tiny bit of detailing or beautification of the coastline here. It's not complete or finished in any way, but I think it does help to add like a bit of a tree layer and some of these beautiful wild growing flowers as well. But it is a slightly empty area, and we do have like pockets where we could add fun types of development. So if you've got any ideas for what to add to any of these areas, you can kind of use the district names here to locate your idea. If that's what you want, then let me know in the comments. Back to the cargo harbor here at Port of Santa Isabel, where this absolutely legendary garbage truck has actually just picked up 20 tons of garbage, and the port is now functioning at full efficiency. And what's even better is that the job count down here has just exploded with all the new development we've added. We're sitting at 3,561, and it continues to increase as businesses and establishments continue leveling up. And as a result of this, we've generally seen a lot more traffic down here. The bridge in particular is seeing a ton of use. But something much more important is that our unemployment is now 1.6%, which I'm pretty sure if you ask like an actual smart, educated economist, they would say that is too low. You need some form of like structural, actually I don't know anything about this, but this is really, really low, and it's opening up different possibilities for new developments for us, because we could focus quite a bit on residential now if that's what we wanted. Yeah, let's actually just wrap up with some residential infills, because we've got a couple of spots that needs a bit of development before it makes sense to purchase extra tiles and continue the sprawl of the city. And as mentioned earlier, the port is likely going to see a revamp sometime in the hopefully near future, so it doesn't make sense to invest too much time here until we've got an idea of the changes we'd like to commit to. Now, infill is probably not the correct term, but I've got a couple of areas. As you can see, we've got this spot here in the western half of Ravenwood that is completely undeveloped. We've got a few spots out here we might as well work on. And I think once again, adding the small fully plopped areas is going to add a ton of character, and it's going to allow us to continue utilizing a lot of zoning, especially as we move further eastwards to continue the sprawl. Because we're going to achieve a pretty decent balance. So continuing the development type that we're seeing in this part of Ravenwood, we've got Mill Street here, which is just begging for a single developer type development, sorry, mumbo jumbo. Now I'd love to see if we can do like a row house type development on the larger lot on this side of the street, and then perhaps fit in a bit of, now we probably can't have any development on the other side because it's a pretty steep drop off. But to facilitate some row house development, we kind of need to break this up a bit further. Although we could actually just angle it towards this street here. I didn't remember this being zonable, but apparently it is. I think at least one parking lot road to just kind of break it up would be a good fit. So let's just use one of the ones I never really get to use and just kind of fill that in. So the parking lot is going to be relatively big compared to the amount of row housing actually placed here. But I mean, this is California after all, so I think it wouldn't be too out of character to have a lot of space dedicated for surface parking. Although it's even worse in other states that aren't as dense as California. Because surprisingly, the density, at least of the city proper of Los Angeles, isn't actually that bad. Anyways, this is probably overkill. We're going to downgrade at least this parking lot road to maybe just the single version like this one. And I'm just trying to make sure, I'm just trying to eyeball how many row houses or developments I can kind of squeeze in here to make sure it's gonna look all okay, but I think this should be fine. Row housing, yeah, change of plans. It's going to be this medium density building instead. But it's a really interesting building. We need a bit more of this. So let's just enable anarchy and get some of these placed. And then we'll make sure that the roads allow for these buildings to actually be placed here. It isn't too bad. I mean, we can kind of tweak how this one is placed within the lot, just like this, without having to actually remove anything with better bulldozer, surprisingly. The same goes for this one. And this one obviously has quite a bit of space on this side of High Street. Is this? Oh, it just auto-named to High Street, I think. That's, no, actually I named that. Anyways, moving on. This one though is a bit of a squeeze, so we're going to be a little cheeky here. We do have just a bit of additional space we can utilize here in terms of like the contours of the land. So let's just make sure we can fit this fella in at the very least. Like this, maybe even squeeze in one at the end of the cul-de-sac. Yes, let's do just that. Get in a few more people, maybe a slightly taller version out here just to kind of break it up. Just to break it up a little bit. Would love it to just be aligned to this one, I guess, so just gonna do like this. And yeah, I mean, I think that actually kind of works. Very, very simple stuff. I'm hoping I can add a median here. So we can get a few more trees and whatnot in place, as well as on the outer side of Mill Street. And on this side as well, I don't want people parking right here. And then we'll just get some trees added. Oh, it looks so cool with the freight train snaking its way down this ravine here, moving through all the bridges and inwards, where it is eventually going to reach Sacramento. I would like to add just a bit of zoning as well to this part of Ravenwood, but currently none of the existing roads really offer that opportunity. But there is a little ridge here though that is completely untouched. What a beautiful thing. Let's move in and put down some pavement, some concrete, and get it all developed up. So let's see, I'm hopeful I can just freeform this and kind of connect right here and then make it as straight as possible. Obviously, because that is going to aid our zoning endeavors a little bit. So we're just gonna move real close. Just like this. I'm trying to respect the topography, and then not really, because if I'm going to really put myself in the mind of greedy developers, I don't really care about the topography too much unless it costs a ton of money for me to change, which it probably won't. So let's just get Caraway Street placed down. That's a pretty decent name, I find. It's a little more interesting than the constant daffodil streets and whatnot. Zoning wise, can I get a bit more zoning space by just keying and unkeying this segment? I can. And let's just go for the good old USA Southwest low density housing. Now I don't think we actually have 6 tiles deep buildings in this zone, but I am still going to just make sure I restrict it to, let's see, we could actually go for 4 pretty much throughout. I think 3 would probably be a kinder solution in terms of like the topography, but let's just try 4 and see how that works. Yeah, it doesn't look too bad. It's not like it's really wrecking up the hillside here too much. So we'll be wrapping up today's changes with a bit more work done to Broadway, because I don't mind the stretch in downtown being the widest at 8 tiles, but I do feel the transition to just being 4 tiles wide is maybe a bit drastic. So this is going to result in the, let's say, forceful relocation of a few businesses, but I am going to move into large roads, grab the 6-lane road and just pause the game and commit to some upgrades of Broadway, so that the transition is from 8 tiles to 6 tiles, and then eventually, as we sprawl further eastwards into the hills and mountains, it is probably going to move down to 4 tiles. So let's get the upgrade tool enabled, make sure we only have snap to existing geometry, and let's see. So this stretch is actually all elevated, so we'll of course need to make sure we commit to the same upgrade just like this, and then in this case it's not elevated, so let's make sure we don't have that on. So this is going to probably result in some issues, and we can already see some zoning issues caused by this change. Which is why we did the 8 tile change in here, also just to make it look cooler. So it is going to require me to just redraw a few roads, I think, but I think it's all gonna be worth it. Alright, so Talbot certainly took a bit of a hit, but the reason I demolished so much and redrew this segment of Birchdale Street is just so that I had a decent zoning grid to work with again, because it did get completely misaligned, which is just the case, unfortunately, when you upgrade from 4 to 6 tiles in terms of the road, at least if you insist on centering it with snap to existing geometry. Of course, the reason I did that is that I really just want to maintain this viewpoint right here, and I think it looks a bit more symmetrical now that this stretch of Broadway is 6 tiles wide. And we did compensate for the lost development in Talbot, I guess hopefully by of course rezoning it, although it is going to need to level up to provide the same amount of jobs, but then also zoning some all new stuff out here by Broadway and Broad Street. So let's just hit play and let all this good stuff develop and see how it actually looks. Now this is a fun angle to just observe all the traffic, all the hustle and bustle of a growing city, which, you know, 34,000 inhabitants, it's nothing crazy, but in terms of the scale, things are starting to look pretty decent, I think. And that's gonna be a wrap for this episode. We were all over the place, of course, but I think the changes and the revamps done today were much needed. I think the downtown core is a much more interesting place now. It needs a bit of detail, a bit of polishing, of course, especially the custom building here, but there's time for that in future episodes. So thank you guys so much for watching, all the wonderful feedback and support. I do hope to see you all in the next one. Goodbye.